What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Elevation here with another episode of the JBP Elevated, where we speak on the Joe Budden podcast and all of his co-hosts on and off the pod.
Salute to Joe, man. Salute to Joe. He is using us, paying customers, as guinea pigs to decipher what iteration of the show fits best without him. I told y'all a couple of months ago that he's going to be treating us like guinea pigs and he's going to be doing an experiment. He's going to let certain people miss pods and he's going to segue his way out of the pod. The only thing that I was wrong on was him hiring Mark Lamont Hill. That was a wild card for me. I didn't anticipate that happening. But everything else is happening just as I said it would. In 2025, do not be surprised if we don't see Joe on every pod every week. This is not just a holiday situation based. This is not because he's busy based. This is Joe doing an experiment on us in real time. We are the guinea pigs. You can't implement these roles on the main pod and notice that he hasn't. We pay for Patreon. He's doing all these Imani-led Patreons, Flip-led Patreons. He's trying to see how they can operate without Ish. He's trying to see how they can operate without Flip. And he's getting feedback from his audience in real time. Next year, because of all the movements he's making and because I'm seeing it for the experiment that it actually is, next year, don't be surprised when you see Joe only on Wednesday pods. When you see Joe only on Wednesday pods. When you see Flip only on Patreons, leading the Patreon like he just did this episode, which I will get into in a little bit. Expect Mark Lamont Hill to possibly lead one of the Patreon episodes on Friday. I would say Tuesday, but for whatever reason, Tuesday and Wednesday are the more serious topics. Fridays and Saturdays are the more laid-back topics. Mark Lamont Hill has made a living speaking on serious topics. Whenever political things come up, of course, they're going to have Mark Lamont Hill on. Whenever things of substance come up that are important and are in the public sphere, Mark Lamont Hill will be on. But anticipate him leading his own Patreon episodes. Joe is setting up a network, and I know I'm constantly speaking on the network, so everybody's clowning on me because nothing has happened yet. Nothing's come to fruition. But when it comes to business ventures like this, you got to pay attention for the long-term plan. Joe is trying to set it up to where he could be a Leor Cohen, to where he could be an Elliot Grange, to where he could be a Russell Simmons before all the bullshit came out about him. I'm just solely speaking on the executive model. He does not want to be the talent anymore. Yesterday, I was just speaking on Drake not knowing when to make the shift. He got a $400 million deal, but it wasn't because he was going to executive produce anything. We're giving you this money so you can continue making music, nigga. Joe is looking at that play and is looking at how he got jerked in the music industry and is seeing the same correlations in podcasting. I've amassed millions off of talking. I don't want to have to talk for the rest of my life. I want to enjoy these millions. I'm already in different rooms. I'm already in different circles. Did you know you can't just go purchase a Ferrari? You have to meet the owner. You have to go meet the craftsman, everybody that's actually working on your vehicle. You get to go to the shop to look at your vehicle being made. It's a whole 8-month process for you to get a whip. So when he was telling us that story, he was already 6 months in the process. But you think that he's accumulating all these things to not be able to enjoy them? This is a case study. We're watching in real time us get treated like guinea pigs so Joe can get all his analytics to see which variations of the show do best on what days, on what networks, aka Patreon, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. He's accumulating all the numbers, and by this time next year, do not be surprised when we can only receive Joe on Patreon episodes and the cast lets us know that Joe is going to be appearing on the next Patreon episode, or the next main pod is going to be behind the paywall and that's the only time you're going to see Joe. Do not be surprised. He's already had a model that has shown him and Ian and everyone under the JBN that every time a music topic comes up, something in the sphere that's important as far as culture related comes up, people anticipate what it is that I'm saying. We already had our analytics from back in the day when we started broaching on serious topics, and people were getting frustrated because I wasn't studying the topics. I wasn't well versed in the topics. They still were anticipating what it was that I wanted to say or had to say about said topic. So if people are getting upset with me and frustrated at me at the topics that I have no idea about but decided to speak on, and they're still anticipating what it is that I had to say, what value do I have in something that I'm a genius at? Before Joe started speaking on how much is a stream worth, niggas was just accepting that 1,500 streams was the equivalent of an album. As soon as Joe started speaking on his experiences with these companies, because that's another thing that Joe doesn't get credit on, everybody just does business deals with the company, and then after they are with the company for a couple of years, they figure out that their contract's fugazi, and then they want to shit on the company. Joe was telling us in real time what he was dealing with while working with the company, giving everyone information. And we're seeing in real time what he's doing with said information. You don't get information just to pass it off to somebody else. You get the information to implement it in your own company. While he was working for all these other people and he was seeing all the execs just accumulate all the ends, but they're on trips everywhere being busy, he was looking at them as opposed to looking at his peers, aka the artists. How do I get out of this? We saw Joe make the shift to In Love and Hip Hop. That in essence was his creation. We saw the tactics that he took in Love and Hip Hop. We see some of those tactics applying to the JBP. We saw and heard Flip go to the WWE and constantly speak on being a heel. I'm not going to take credit for this, but I do have to acknowledge it in this video. Shout out to whoever had commented this on one of my videos. Joe and Flip are doing the WWE model with the behind the scenes now. We can't take any of this shit as at face value as if it's just the truth. Flip went behind the scenes and started acting the ass on the behest of Joe. But anyway, let's get back to this normal topic. Today's Patreon episode was actually a really good episode. This is a successful experiment thus far with this iteration. Flip, you have found out that he is an A-Mike, and I think you've known that for a long time, which is why you haven't fired this nigga, even though he's acted way more belligerently than Rory and Mal ever could. Because I was on your side with the Rory incident because Rory was always trying to fight you, but Flip is always trying to fight you too. Flip's always saying we can take this shit outside, just like Rory was. So maybe you see way more talent in Flip than you ever did in Rory because you see Flip actually making moves on his own, so you respect it. But today's Patreon episode was a good one. Everybody played their role. Flip has a way of getting everyone to speak. Whenever Joe's there, everyone walks on eggshells and they can't perform their best selves because they're concerned about how he's going to critique them. When Flip is the A-Mike, they were able to get all their thoughts off and be cohesive with their thoughts. When Flip is in his calm demeanor like he was today, not necessarily going based off of antics, not having to be the skit nigga, not having to be belligerent with his body. When Flip has this type of perspective on podding, he could be one of the greats. So hopefully he's taking lessons on his own episode. This was a really good episode. Imani got in his personal bag. I was cool with it. Melissa has been reserved. And shout out to Melissa. I saw her latest episode to her podcast dropping. She absolutely took the route that I told her to take, or not. Let me rephrase that because that sounds crazy. She absolutely took the route that I said would be successful as opposed to the one that would be failure. If she labeled this as a podcast and went with the podcast shtick, it would fail on its face. But since she's going with the health model and she's going with the informative model, and she's putting a lot of people on game that weren't privy to it, she's going to be successful. We can't look at the numbers early on. We got to stop looking at the numbers because a lot of people look at my page right now and see that I'm getting 3,000 to 5,000 views per video, but they don't remember. I remember wholeheartedly, but they don't remember when I was getting 100 views, 200 views every video. So we can't look at Melissa's video right now, especially since she hasn't really been in this medium on her own since I haven't watched the Foodies podcast, I don't know what that was about, but this is a completely different sphere. Since she wasn't in this medium on her own, she's in essence starting from scratch. So we have to give her grace. Flip is a different story because he already has his own network. So when people throw shots in his direction, I let it fly because he can accept that. He can take that because he's already been in his lane. Melissa jumped back into this lane, might have thought it was easier than it was. And I don't want to say she's being humbled, but if she continues this health path, she's going to get somewhere with it. She just revealed some information on one of her shorts talking about she took weight loss pills and she said the specific names and the side effects and what to expect from it. I think that's a major lane. So Imani was cool in his personal bag. Melissa was cool in her cool bag. Flip has a way of getting Ish to open up in a way that Joe doesn't. Flip has a way of getting Ice to open up in a way that Joe doesn't. So I'd be curious to see this iteration of this podcast going forward. And we will be able to see this podcast going forward because this iteration will be once a week on Patreon. Start getting it in your head right now that we will not see Joe on every episode. Joe is going to be like a Jay-Z. In order for you to see me, you have to pay for my time. I'm trying to put y'all on game. He's been doing this for a couple months already. We always just like, damn, no Patreon without Joe, no me. But he doesn't care what we're saying in the comments. He's going based off of the analytics. He's going based off of the numbers. If I'm getting 100,000 less views when I'm not on every single time and it hasn't gotten better, I will stop the experiment. But if the first time I wasn't on, it's 100,000 less views. And the second time I wasn't on, it's 50,000 less views. And then the third time I wasn't on, it was 20,000 less views as opposed to 100,000 every time. Then my experiment is working and I'm just going to give it time. And because he's done it multiple times and switched up the iterations, it lets me know that he's calculating his numbers. Be ready next year for this. And Imani, I see you trying to work your way back up because you've been on the Patreons quite frequently. J1 is the one that needs to concern himself with his spot at the JBP. But Imani, I think you're going to be straight, brother. Today's episode was straight. Most of they were just talking about relationships. But I wanted to speak on the business aspect of this pod as opposed to the actual pod itself. So hopefully y'all are hearing what I'm saying. Hopefully we can anticipate seeing Joe a lot less because that's the model. That's the business that he's showing us will happen in 2025. But I appreciate y'all. Hey, y'all turned up yesterday, man. Y'all turned up. Let's keep it going, man. We ain't stopping. I appreciate y'all. Until tomorrow, y'all stay safe. Peace.